Good evening. This is the meeting of March 16th for the Conservation Advisory Council. My name is Julie Noble. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:05. Present with us today, we have council members Emily Hauser, Kevin McAvoy, myself, Sebastian Pilateri, and Common Council Liaison Michelle Hirsch. And we also have guest Marco Spodek. And we anticipate Lorraine to be coming any moment. Marco, do you have any comments that you'd like to make for public comment?
I don't think so.
Okay. Do we have any modifications to the agenda?
I just have a under new business, if we wanted to, for next meeting, we had talked about doing like a planning session. And I threw together some like draft ideas into a document that we could revise then.
Great. I think for planning for April visioning meeting, is that okay? We talk about that then?
That's perfect. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Looks like Lorraine just got here, so that's great. Okay. Any changes otherwise then? Hey, Lorraine. We just started. All right, so if not, review and approval of the February 2021 minutes. Now, I saw notes come through on the minutes from Lorraine, and then I saw notes come through on the minutes from Emily. Emily, I wasn't clear if you were providing feedback on Lorraine's minutes or on Kevin's minutes.
Just on Kevin's minutes.
Okay, so then Kevin, when you finalize those, you're gonna have to take Lorraine's and Emily's.
Yes, yeah, got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Lorraine's were small. There wasn't a large comment on there.
Okay. Any concerns or comments about the minutes besides what we've received from Emily and Lorraine? And Emily or Lorraine, do you need to speak to your comments at all?
No. No.
Okay. So if we're good, then we need a motion to accept the February minutes as amended.
Motion accepted to accept.
Lorraine, okay, can I have a second? Sebastian, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good, thank you, unanimous, and thank you, Kevin. All right, old business, Lorraine, wood smoke and air quality subcommittee.
Okay, let's see. Sorry I was a little late. I'm having computer problems, but I think I got it. No, I don't. So let's see. So the first item I have here is the DEC letter that we agreed to send last month, and I sent to you all. So I'm hoping you all had a chance to take a look. And I got comments from Julie, which I had incorporated. Anybody else have ideas on that?
I didn't look at Julie's, but I think somewhere in the salutation that you should say that is to the DEC commissioner.
It was the assistant, let's see, I have it here.
Well, you never say NYSDEC in the one I read.
Okay.
You just say assistant commissioner.
Okay, I'll take a look, thanks. And then I'll send that again to you all so that we could send it. Let's see. So I wanted to let you all know that the CAC air quality website has been updated. Thank you, Julie, with links to the Bard College Community Science Lab air quality website. And a press release came out March 9th announcing the anniversary of the CACI, Kingston Air Quality Initiative, having collected 1 year's worth of PM 2.5 data with the large particle monitor. Yeah, so the city's website's been updated, as I said. And the BARD website includes the press release, so I have the link here. Next, I had attended a UC Davis webinar on March 4th that was entitled Indoor Ventilation and Health Effects. it was discussing inside spaces and matters such as filtration and ventilation when it comes to outside pollutants as well as indoor pollutants. So my main takeaways were that filtration is far from a complete solution when dealing with particulate matter, and that low-cost air quality sensors can best be used to identify pollution problems and educate communities so they may take action to eliminate sources of pollution and mitigate health risks. The EPA, by the way, was piggybacked at the end of that morning of talks to solicit help from the scientists participating, because there is such an intense need for mitigating pollutants in the PM 2.5 in classrooms and indoor spaces where wildfires are occurring. It's a very difficult problem. I wanted to mention 3 items having to do with anaerobic digestion, which is now being seen as a way to, being floated as a way to deal with waste, such as trash, could be organic waste, could be municipal solid waste, could even be animal waste. So I wanted to mention first off that there's a proposed venture at the Enterprise West. These, by the way, these items I'm going to be mentioning have the potential to affect Kingston air quality, so that's why I'm talking about them. The Enterprise West, what should we call it? Project, which is at the former IBM site. One of the proposed ventures there has the potential to affect the air quality. The Freeman had reported that among the potential occupants for the space was a firm proposing a waste to energy plant that would work alongside the indoor agricultural enterprise that is proposed. The waste to energy plants can either be burn plants that burn biomass, organic plant matter, or those that employ anaerobic digestion to break down organic matter and then sell the biogas residue to be burned as fuel. So in this era of the New York State Climate Protection Act, the research is showing that burning biomass or biogas, number 1, pollutes the air, and number 2, is not carbon neutral, as the argument is that since methane is 25 times more potent a greenhouse gas, producing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is preferable. In fact, New York State is now charged with reducing CO2, so burning biomass or biogas should not be encouraged, as Bill McKibben recently noted, and I discussed not too long ago. The second project has to do with, or the second reference to anaerobic digestion has to do with the February New York State DEC airmail newsletter, which is touting anaerobic digestion as a positive solution to animal waste on farms. And I quoted that here. But the problem with the concept, again, is that emitting CO2 is not what a goal that we should be aiming for. It ignores the fact that burning the end product, the biogas, produces air pollution, in this case, when you're talking about animal waste, in the form of very high nitrous oxide emissions, which can then certainly result in unhealthy PM particulate matter levels. And the third aspect of anaerobic digestion, for the same reasons, the city of Kingston needs to be aware that the Ulster County Resource Recovery Agency continues, according to the Freeman, to entertain the idea of permitting and creating a county landfill or waste to energy plant as part of their energy plan. It's been reported a few times in the Freeman, most recently February 26th. So I just wanted that to be on people's radar. And I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any action that you wanted us to take on any of those items?
Well, I wondered on that final one, maybe Emily would have something to say regarding EMC. I'm not sure, but let's see. DEC. That's a good question. If there is an action, I'll think about that for next time. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Marco, is there anything you wanted to say to that or anything else?
She addressed me too, so
Yep, Emily, go ahead then.
what was the final one that you were saying about the EMC?
Oh,
waste
it wasn't
management.
specifically EMC. It was just that the Ulster County Resource Recovery Agency is continuing to entertain the idea of permitting and creating either county landfill or a waste to energy plant, according to the Freeman several times this last couple of months, as part of their 10-year plan. So I didn't know if that had come up maybe at EMC.
Well, the county legislature signed the solid waste management plan in late February. And the Resource Recovery Agency is trying to implement that plan. And so you are right, those options that are listed is what they're going to be looking at.
Okay.
Then, and also, I don't know if you're aware that I don't know, the anaerobic digestion is part of the there's work being done to make sure that large food waste generators are separating their waste and either composting it or taking it to anaerobic digesters. And that is one, a county law, and I'm not really sure where the New York State law is on that, but that's one way to deal with. And also, I'm not really sure how sewage sludge is handled. And but I guess that you might want to look into how sewage sludge is handled.
Yeah, thank you. That's certainly another use for anaerobic digestion. Yeah, the composting is certainly the better of the two alternatives. But yeah, thank you. Okay.
And I know that anyway, so we're all trying to solve pieces of the puzzle here.
Yep.
So
Okay, Marco, did you have something you wanted to add? Anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll just add that as far as like updates with sort of equipment deployments and stuff goes, Lindsay, the community science lab director, and I deployed a few purple air sensors at a local community member's home last week. So these are PM 2.5 sensors, both inside and outside. We've been watching those data intermittently, and we should be taking those sensors back either probably the end of next week or the week after. And then we also have a plan to deploy another set of sensors inside and outside the home of a community member. We were supposed to do it today, but we ran into some technical difficulties. So we're probably going to do it in the next couple days or next week. And then this Friday, we're set to begin the installation of a weather station on top of the Andy Murphy Center to sort of complement our particulate matter analyses. So we're going to have temperature, barometric pressure, wind direction, wind speed, rainfall, dew point, solar radiation, things like that. And it's going to be an online dashboard that will be publicly accessible. So that's pretty cool. And that will complement all of the sort of residential, or excuse me, not residential, more like ambient particulate data we collect. And it's going to also help to contextualize any patterns we see overall. So that's exciting.
Great.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't realize you were going to be collecting things like rainfall.
Yeah, there's going to be a rain gauge up there. The installation is probably going to happen in a few parts, but that will be the probably final component that we install.
Great.
That's
Okay.
great.
Anything else on air quality subcommittee?
I threw the links into the chat as well for the website, so if folks want to check that out, there's some more. The BARD website has sort of a more in-depth sort of look at how the data are generated and curated, while the city one is more sort of informative around like exposure pathways and things like that to different air pollutants.
Thank
Yep.
you.
All right, everyone, you can check those things out. Thanks, Marco, for putting those in there. Okay. Anything else on that?
No.
All right. Open space projects, conservation board, and housing nexus. I know Emily, you had said that you wanted to talk about. Was it Emily that said that?
Yeah, thanks for covering that. Can we move that to a little later? I know I'll just go ahead. So I was on the EMC meeting, and people are really worried about we had a presentation by Dennis Doyle, and he's very concerned that the role of the CACs, which is to preserve open space, that CACs, EMCs, and so on, that really kind of think about Dennis Doyle is the head of planning for the county, and so the county planning department head, and you know, he really made a good point that really what housing and other development, but in particularly housing, is kind of the opposite of the open space. In other words, like if you've identified the open space, maybe we should be more cognizant of kind of saying where housing could be. Even and he just kind of and I just think it's a really good thing to look at, and it's not just the city of Kingston. This was addressed to all the county municipalities, and it's really anyway. I just think that I think there'll be more out there on this, but we could always think about that, like, okay, we want to protect these things, but there are places where you can put housing, and especially because people are so worried that the housing right now is so tight and it takes so long to build any kind of housing, especially the housing for low and moderate income. So anyway, I just want to kind of have us think about that. I'm not saying there should be any action right now, and there may be action on the county level.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the ways that our open space plan can be used. I don't know if that's a role of the Conservation Advisory Council for us to be identifying the housing
Right.
locations, but I don't know. I'd like to hear what other people think, but you know, we've provided the tool of the open space plan. So now the tools are there for people to look at of what ideally is open space. So then the negative would be places where we think that concentrated housing would be, I would say by default, right? So
Yes,
you had something?
and
Oh,
Emily, you can go ahead and address.
Oh, and I was just going to say that was kind of everyone's reaction, was that, you know, on the EMC, the CAC was, well, that's our job, right? To identify open space. And it's not the opposite, but we do have the information. So I think that's a good way to think about it.
I was gonna add, I guess, two things. One would be to think about how the open space plan, I know their city is thinking about rezoning or changing the zoning code. And just, I'm sure it will be, but like to make sure that those things are tucked in with each other, I guess. And then the other thing would just be to think about if legally our mandate is not to deal with those things, then maybe it'd be worthwhile. I know there's an association of statewide of CACs. I think this is super critical, and it's like, especially for Kingston, the more people get pushed out of the city, the more sprawl there's going to be. And so addressing affordable housing within the city of Kingston, maybe it means less open space, quote unquote, less open space for us here. But on a county scale, it's actually beneficial because you're reducing sprawl out into the suburbs of the city. And so maybe there would be a way, if this is an issue that other CACs are going to run into, of their mandates kind of not measuring up to the moment, maybe there should be, I know there's a statewide organization that could put pressure on changing the law, or having state legislature propose to change the law to allow us to be able to factor those things in. Because I do think it's critical. It's like, who are we protecting the environment for? It's for the people who live here. And that's not, if they have to move or can't live here because there's no housing, then we're not doing our jobs.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Okay. Yeah, we've wrestled with this question at the Kingston Land Trust. In terms of identifying areas that would be suitable for remain as open space in the built section of Kingston, and areas that would be suitable for affordable housing. And it's been kicked around and kicked around and kicked around. I think right now where we're left on that board is that we sort of backed out of the community land trust for the moment, and we're letting the citizens group that was doing that take the lead. And we would only provide a support role, but part of that support role could be identifying parcels that would be suitable for open space, or alternatively for housing. And they don't have to conflict, I think, but it takes some careful management. Just as a disclaimer, I was involved in as a community garden advocate in New York City many years ago, and that turned into like kind of a bloodbath between the affordable housing people and the community garden people. Yeah, but so I've warned everybody that I come into contact with as having this discussion to try to avoid that dynamic. And we've had that discussion at the at Growell Kingston as well, with Emily and Trudy from Novo, and Jen Morris and Greg Shaheen, and a host of other people that are involved with that. So.
Okay, so is there action that we want to take on this at this point? I mean, I could bring it to the state NISAC, New York State Association of Conservation Commissions. I mean,
I'm not sure. I was saying that because I feel like if we feel like we're unable to take on these issues because they don't align with the law that laid out why CACs exist, then it might be a reason to take it to them. But if we think we're comfortable operating within the legal definition of how we should operate and also taking on these issues, I think it's critical that we do that, again, because who are we conserving things for? It's for the people who live here. But I guess it'd be a question for everyone, or the CAC, the CAC, if we really think that we can try to address both of those things or think about both of those things at the same time while staying within like our mandate.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not familiar with any other conservation advisory councils working on housing particularly. Not that I know every agenda of every CAC in the whole state, but I'm pretty versed in it. But I wonder if, I mean, it feels like there's a lot of people that are using the word housing around the city, but I'm not sure if there's one central like process yet for addressing housing on a city level. And I feel like we could be part of that conversation. I don't know if that we should be driving that conversation.
Right.
Yeah, it's like I At that same meeting, I did ask Dennis Doyle about the Golden Hill complex and how much open space would be left behind, and that's kind of like, that's one of the where we would be involved, right? Like you're taking this parcel land on Golden Hill and you're gonna and there the answer is there, you know, it is going to be, there's going to be open space. I haven't been following it. Has anyone else been following it?
Less recently. I had been for a while, the last 2 months now.
That's probably more than I am. So, but
I think Lawton Park was another one that was considered, but I'm not sure what the status of that is. It hasn't been on the planning agenda, and I haven't seen it at the Common Council agenda either.
Yeah, I believe Lawton Park's been pulled out. That's been moved, that application.
Yeah, well, with that one, the owner, or one of the owners, Paul Manza, had at some point in time was considering what he was calling workforce housing, which may not truly be affordable housing. I mean, you're getting into definitions and income levels and that type of technical thing there. But his plan at that point in time, which was a while ago, was to design it sort of, kind of using the Hudsonia and Hudson River Estuary Program biodiversity technique, where you limit the development to a certain area, and then you leave the open space around it with that, so you don't completely, you leave a lot of the habitat in place. And that's the gist of it.
Well, also, Kevin, weren't you on the task force for zoning to pick the form-based code?
Yes, yeah, with Dover.
So that sort of would come into play as well, right? With
that would,
form-based code and the comprehensive plan and.
Yeah, all of that came up with, well, the comprehensive plan has an affordable housing component in it. And recently it had an open space component to it, but now it's, formalized as part of it. So both would have to be considered. And I think in our discussions, we had Michael Gilliard was on the task force too. I mean, and he was, wanted to make sure they kept the housing component in there. And, my role, I guess, was to make sure they keep the open space component in there, but also the housing thing, because that was another thing the Kingston Land Trust was interested in. So I think we're trying to keep both going.
Right.
Not one or the other. It doesn't have to be one of those, the zero sum.
Right.
games.
My understanding of form-based code too is about preserving open space or having, parks and land.
Among other things, yeah. But we would include affordable housing, and if that were to come to pass, I think that would come out. Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything that we want to do at this point? Keep thinking about it?
This would be good for me, I think.
Sebastian, what's on your mind?
So many things, Julie. Thank you for asking. No, I don't know. I was thinking about a way to I just did a quick Google search because I remember the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. I think that was passed in New York State. And thinking about the intersection of housing or I guess open space and development for housing, and maybe as a precursor, if there are community groups that are calling for this type of a study to be done, I think, which is a precursor to enacting an Emergency Tenant Protection Act, maybe we could join them in asking for that, because I do feel like a kind of a study of housing would come before creating this tension between open space and housing. And so doing a study would be a way of understanding what are the actual demands right now so that we could better weigh trade-offs in the future. I don't know which groups are asking for that, but it could be a way for us to stick our toe in without really straying so far outside.
Well, as far as the ETPA is concerned, it's based on housing that's already built and the vacancy rate of the houses, the apartments that already exist.
I mean, I definitely agree that I don't want it to come down to, because there is so much talk about housing and there are these proposals for putting houses places or putting tiny houses or putting whatever it is. I don't want it to come down to, you know, the open spacers versus the housers, right? Like,
Yeah.
No.
and if there's a way for us to participate in the process so that we can all collectively use the data that we have to identify the best places, we should do that. I just don't know what that looks like right now.
Right. I think we can follow what's going on in the county, but I think that's it, like having everyone at the table, not, you know, because it's how it's open space, but it's the housing, the people that are concerned about housing, land use planning in general. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've always been really good about looking at housing and just making sure they're more sustainable or out of the floodplain, right? So if you look back at what we've done, it's really, we've never, except for the one in the floodplain, we've never said, don't build this or something, right? So, which is the Meadows or whatever it was called. That's what I would remember.
Right. Okay. So I think we'll just keep on the pulse of this unless anyone has a specific action for us to take at this moment. I can continue to keep it on the agenda if you think that that's something you want me to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a good conversation.
Okay. All right. Should we move
And
on?
I
then?
just wanted to take a moment to say that I looked into the anaerobic digestion information and while we were on the phone or while we've been talking too. And so I'm not aware of actually what happened with Ulster County mandatory food scraps. It got slowed down because of COVID. And there's lots of copies of the law, but I can't figure out if it actually passed. And then the New York state law, which the county law is kind of, they were simultaneously happening. There is a comment on April 27th, or the comments are due on the law, April 27th of this year.
And which code is this that they're?
Oh, I put it, I'm sorry, it's in
Oh,
the
it's in
chat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
sorry.
I moved my screen, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, Emily, one last question. That had to do with, was this an EMC meeting that Dennis was at or?
Yeah, it was a January meeting, so you can look at the minutes and
Okay,
see
will
what
do.
he.
Okay,
Yeah.
January meeting. Yeah, got it.
Thank you, Emily, for posting that. I looked at it just briefly now. It looks like, from what I can tell, the local agencies would be left with the choice of whether to compost or dispose of, recycle in some way the waste. So it's not mandating anaerobic digestion, but.
No, I think it's, yeah, I don't even want to, I just know that they do list that as an option if that's the closest choice or whatever. Yeah, and I don't think it's up to the municipality, it's up to the generator, but don't quote me on that.
Up to the, I'm sorry, oh, to the food waste generator?
Yeah, municipalities aren't mandated to compost right
Yeah.
now. It's just.
No,
It's the generators.
Okay, let's see. Oh, I see. Okay, I was misreading this law. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Shall we move on? All right, Hutton Brickyard Development Review. I got a correspondence today from Kyla in the planning office from Hutton Brickyards. I circulated it this afternoon. I can fully appreciate if you haven't had a chance to look at it because I just got it, which means I just gave it to you all. But if you have had a chance, or even if you haven't, we did get comments back from McManus and Associates to the comments that we submitted. Did anyone get a chance to look at those?
No,
Okay.
Briefly,
Okay, so basically they went through and responded to each section of our very thorough letter. And actually the responses were pretty thorough as well. I would say we don't need to go over this in detail right now. Since I didn't get it until recently, so you all didn't get it, but take a look at it. And I don't know if there's any, I mean, I will say at this point, the city staff also submitted, reviewed a most recent set of plans. It seems as though there's been a number of different iterations that keep changing of their design. So we did submit comments, we being Parks, DPW, engineering, planning, grants, management, submitted comments on their plans, and we received comments back from that as well, a response from that, again, just today. So we've also had meetings with the mayor to talk about, you know, the plans that are going on down there. I know that this went before the planning board. Did it go to planning board last night, Kevin?
yeah, it did. I didn't get to that meeting now.
Okay,
No, I was, yeah, caught up on a grant application.
okay. So again, my understanding is that they keep submitting different revisions to the design. So
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure where that stands right now. But generally, I mean, just some of the comments they went over with ours, you know, they seem to have an answer to everything.
Mhm.
Yeah. I haven't looked certainly at much, but I was looking at this piece D, section D, F and I. Maybe this is
Pull out.
page, what is it, page 2, top of page 2.
Yep.
Fire pits were also previously approved by the planning board. All proposed locations for wood burning are in the already developed portions of the site. Wood burning will be carried out in conformance with applicable state and municipal codes. I don't think that answered our concern as a CAC that we voiced, that we requested that they do not burn wood because they would be subjecting surrounding neighbors to unhealthful conditions and worsening our air quality in Kingston. So, and that they would be out of compliance with the code part, chapter 135-4. So I don't know, what is the next step for this then? This actual document that we have here?
There isn't necessarily a next step. It's not usually a dialogue. I don't know what the next step is. I mean, I will say when they say the wood burning will be carried out in conformance with applicable state and municipal codes, both state and municipal, well, at least our municipal code says you can't have fireplaces, outdoor fire pits, right? Unless you're burning ceremonially or cooking food.
Well, our municipal code basically disallows generating any kind of pollutants that would be harmful to others. So, yeah. So,
Yeah, but it seems like the planning board already approved that. So, I mean, we could write something, we could follow up with the planning board if we're concerned about that in particular. I don't know, because the planning board hasn't approved, well, they've already approved previous plans. This is just now approving the modifications to the amendments to those plans.
mm-hmm.
So So we're not going to necessarily change something that they've already approved.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking it would be important then to write something to the planning board if they're laboring under the idea that it's okay to approve projects that include wood burning. So,
You mean as a general communication, not referencing this project?
well, maybe both. So you're saying that the developers are just adding more pieces to this proposal. They just are continuing to add more, to submit more plans.
Well, this particular approval process includes adding a parking lot up on Lindsley,
Mhm.
at the top of Lindsley, and then adding the pathway to get little, buggies or whatever vehicles down from Lindsley down to the North Street property. And then it adds a couple more little mini cabin things, hospitality cabins. They have a big master plan that has many different parts to it, but part of it has already been approved, and this is now a separate part that's being reviewed.
Yeah, I guess my question is, what can we do as a CAC? And now that we have an air quality initiative in Kingston, to make clear for new projects that the law will be applied to those projects, that the planning board will be applying the code.
I met with Carl Slovin because he purchased Quartz Mansion, and he contacted me because he's now my neighbor. Which I had to discuss that with Suzanne if I would have to be recused. She didn't indicate that at this time, although it could be. We'll see if what will be in the future, but that probably wouldn't be on this board. But to address what you were saying about the wood burning, I reviewed the comments with him, the CAC comments. And his response was like, it's a few people roasting marshmallows.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a political will to do this or not.
Yeah, well, that.
I mean, you've run into that before, with the fire department, I believe, similar issue.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a political question. It's a
Yeah.
public health question, and there are 42 cabins being proposed in addition to multiple wood burning ovens. So the air quality is most definitely going to suffer along with people's health there. So I don't know where we go from here, but I certainly think I'm thinking right now that we should be writing something as a CAC to the planning board to make clear how we want to proceed in Kingston, how we want development to take into account air quality. What do you all think?
I'm sorry, which section of the proposal has been approved?
Kevin, can you speak to that?
Oh, well, they had, I think what they're talking about, they keep tweaking where the glamping areas are and how many glamping units they're going to be, or, whatever they're calling them now, hospitality units, whatever. And I think they had a minor tweak on Lindsley. One of our comments on Lindsley had to do, we had to do with the steep slopes, which you can see how they responded to that. Had to do with surfaces that they were going to use on this old wood trail that goes there. And we also made comments on archaeology that's in that vicinity, then, you know, to avoid that. And I also mentioned that to Carl in the discussion, like, you know, to avoid archaeology. And there is correspondence with the SHPO on this, but I don't know what the status was. I just downloaded this around the same time. I might have downloaded it before you sent it out, Julie. I think I saw this as soon as I was finished with something else. Went to the planning board and pulled a bunch of revised plans and stuff they submitted yesterday.
Have the portions of the master plan that sort of outline the burning protocols been officially approved by the planning board?
I don't think yet.
Because
That's what he's referencing though.
because they're, sorry, what?
That's what this letter, this response says that it has already been approved.
It has,
Oh,
well, it
okay.
had been approved previously. They had approved parts of this. But to address the master plan wasn't up for approval at this time. That includes a hotel,
Oh, gotcha.
some other future development that's really not
Right.
fleshed out at all. I mean, and including putting these hospitality things that look almost like tiny houses in the wetlands, which sounds like it may never happen either. You know, it may, you know, maybe they'll come back to that. I don't know. But that's going to be difficult, doing anything in the wetlands. So there, yeah, there's a few things left for the future. But I guess,
Sorry,
no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Emily.
it sounds to me like this horse has been out, is out of the barn.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that there have been the Uptown restaurant and then this wood burning ovens and the fire pits at the Brickyard. And so these are things that maybe the planning board just has to understand more what the code says and whether or not they can prove these or not going forward.
Mhm.
We've already seen things, you know, be approved. So if this is what the CAC wants to work on and inform people about, then, you know, if the planning board you know, then the planning board maybe just needs the information for them to help them make a decision.
Yeah, I agree, Michelle. And I also think that an important point to be made vis-a-vis the marshmallows is that there are alternatives. You know, there can be propane fire gas pits, there can be electric fireplaces, and it's possible to cook food without burning wood. So I think that, you know, there needs to be awareness that there are other ways to do things without having to put people's health at risk. So I agree that the planning board needs to be informed. I mean, I could offer to work on something if people could chime in with some help with that. I'll do my best. I'm not used to writing to the planning board, but I'll do my best to craft something and I can send it to you all if that sounds okay.
I think sending them some of the science might be
Okay.
a good thing. I don't know if they'll read it, but hopefully somebody will. And I mean, when I read it, I know I just stopped using my fireplace. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Kevin. Okay, that's great. I'll work on something, and maybe Kevin, if you don't mind, I'll pass it by you because you have much more experience. You have the experience with the planning board.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can send it to me. Sure. I'll take a look
Okay.
at it. And
Thank
But
you.
yeah, I told you what Carl said. He's not, he's not taking this seriously, as
Yeah.
a serious issue.
Do the and this may have been mentioned in the past, but so forgive me if so, but do the fire pits that are being proposed for the development like adhere to the code that already exists around outdoor burning in the city limits, or how do those sort of intersect, or is that just being kind of ignored?
Maybe I could answer that if people don't mind. Sebastian, what it comes down to is the anti-pollution code, which is that chapter 135-4.
My middle name is Sebastian, so that actually does work out.
I'm sorry.
How do we not talk about this, Marco?
You called me Sebastian, which is technically correct.
Sorry. Yeah, so it's the anti-pollution code, which describes emitting of various substances that are listed into the air with the effect of discomfort, but also making the air unhealthful for others. And that is patently prohibited within the city of Kingston. So that's the code that is
And
of size.
and so is this just like so it's just kind of a communication issue with the planning board, kind of like that they just kind of are potentially unaware of the existence of this code, or is it just kind of a, like you said, sort of a political will thing, like people don't necessarily like take it seriously?
I don't think we can answer for the planning board, so.
I agree that we can't answer for the planning board, but we can answer for ourselves, which is if we want to address the planning board. I mean, basically, the planning board is permitting them to do something that their code does not permit them to do.
Right. So that's my question. I'm just wondering, yeah, if it's just a sheer like misunderstanding. You said you can't speak for the planning board, which makes sense, but it seems like something. I'm not on the CAC, so but it sounds like something that, Lorraine, if you were going to put together some sort of letter or something that includes the science as well as the code, I mean, I would be happy to help you with it, or to read it over and make notes and stuff.
Yeah, sure. You're certainly part of CACI. Absolutely.
And Lorraine, I made Carl aware that you've been in touch with the Southern California air quality people.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because they have Salt Hotels on this project. That's who's doing the wood burning restaurant. And their chef comes out of Chateau Marmont in West Hollywood. So he wants to do, wood burning in Kingston that he would not be permitted to do in Los Angeles.
Oh, you are so right. That's so interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
when the marshmallow comment came out.
Oh, wow.
I just want to make a point that we are like 1 hour into this meeting,
Yeah,
and we are
let's
only
move forward.
about five items through it.
Yeah.
And that I think we've agreed that there will be a letter written. Is there any? Sorry, Julie.
So Lorraine's gonna draft a letter and bring it to us at the next meeting?
I'll send it out before that so you could look at it.
Okay. Are there any other things we want to discuss regarding this correspondence from Hutton Brickyards?
No, thank you.
Okay. So then we will move on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Esopus Creek, Ashokan Release Environmental Review. Emily, is that you? Did we lose her for a second?
It was my understanding that Kevin and I were going to be following this, and And there's been 2 public hearings, and now the public comment is not due until June, late June. So that it's, there's more time to respond to this if we want to respond. I know Kevin attended the first public meeting. I did too. And that had heavy comments from the town of Saugerties people. And one county legislator, Cahill, spoke. And then on the second comment, Mayor Noble spoke, and there were more Saugerties people and so on. And I've been, I actually was approached by Riverkeeper to see what we were doing with the resolution, either on our own part or actually the question was whether or not the Common Council, whether the CAC was going to ask the Common Council to pass some kind of resolution. There is a draft resolution through Riverkeeper. I did forward it to you by email in the last 15 minutes or so. And so, and I haven't done my homework to go back and see whether or not, if we work on it between now and April, whether it can go through the Common Council process, or if anyone else is taking this on within the Common Council. So we would have to send it to, we'd have to decide on the letter, send it to Public Safety. Public Safety would have to get it through to the Common Council.
Michelle, have you guys talked about the Ashokan or the Esopus releases at all as a council? I know,
Not yet.
okay, I know Don is very concerned about it.
Yeah. Oh, Don Tollerman also spoke,
Yeah.
I believe, at the hearing.
Okay,
Um,
I mean, I'm sure you would support it. Well,
yeah.
I don't want to speak for him.
What's
but
the timing? Have we missed our timing? I think it's June 21st.
Something like that.
Well, we would have to get a communication to council by April 1st. It would go on.
It's June 16th, sorry.
Okay, well, we'd have to get our communication into council by April 1st. It would be on the April subcommittee, and then it would be voted on in May 4th.
Okay,
So if we wanted to do something, we would have to have the language together by the end of this month for me to submit it as a communication.
oh, before our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, is that okay? And then if we wanted to submit our own, we could do it even in June. We could agree on something in June if the CAC wanted to submit comments,
Yes.
right? Okay.
So what are your, Emily's proposing to send this resolution to the council? Yes? That's your proposal?
I guess, yeah, I mean, I think I am proposing it, but it's also means probably gonna have to work on it, so, and this is a memorializing resolution. I'm not sure, you know, I am not at all trying to understand the real technical aspects of this. I've sat in on some talks, but I wouldn't want to comment on that. I'm hoping that the County of Ulster will be providing a lot more detailed information. So I think the memorializing resolution customized for us, for Kingston, is fine. And then the question, would we want to send it ourselves and the common, I mean, so for the Common Council, yes. I'm proposing that we send that.
Okay, what do other people think about doing that?
Uh,
What is the memorializing resolution? What's the actual ask? Is it just to acknowledge the fact that there's the releases that were, what is it saying? Okay, it says, the Lower Esopus is an important contributor to the social, economic, and environmental quality along.
I think if you go all the way down to the bottom, that's the ask.
I know, that's where I am.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It cannot be the solution to New York's turbid water problems. The Hudson River is a critical regional drinking water supply.
I think it's the potential and actual short-term, long-term cumulative impacts in downstream communities must be recognized and thoroughly studied within the DEIS. Impacts on other drinking water systems, local economy, and aesthetics. And then the incorporation of a hard look at a range of alternatives in the draft environmental impact statement, including examining combinations of structural and operational alternatives. The draft environmental impact statement must present a long-term plan to stop the mud, specifically accounting for climate change impacts.
Okay.
Yeah, so the idea is that I mean, one thing that most people have commented on is that they kind of listed a range of alternatives, but they just kind of dismissed them out of hand without really looking at them. And so I've heard that people are asking them to actually, as you say, look at a hard look. Take a hard look at the alternatives, which could be even a filtration plant that filtered out the sediment. And by the way, if you look at the sediment today, or the Esopus is very sediment laden turbid today, high turbidity. And I believe it's mostly, well, I don't know. I'd have to look at the gauges, but it was very, the upper creeks, like up by Bel Air, were definitely running very muddy a week ago. So it may just, it is the nature of the land, of the geology.
Okay. So, go ahead, Kevin.
Kingston Land Trust sent comments in which I think Greg Shaheen had drafted, and he had brought in Mary McNamara to comment on it. And I put in a few minor comments, mostly editorial stuff. But see, the gist of it here is based on our understanding of the EIS and the interim release protocol, we believe that more monitoring needs to be done to better understand the impact of recurring turbidity events, especially in the context of the uncertainty fueled by climate change. The interim release protocol, or IRP as they called it here, should be studied during turbid events as well, which I don't believe the EIS did. And there's more to it, but that's the gist of it.
Okay. So there's, go ahead.
It's my understanding that Ulster County has actually hired a consultant to help them review the proposal. And so I am not at all trying to take, trying to understand the very detailed information that's in this huge document. And I'm hoping that there'll be other people that are really digging down in that, but that we can, decide that, come up with something that basically says we have to study it more and not automatically just feel like we have to, the mud has to be released to protect from flood and whatever else.
Okay. So Emily has made a suggestion that we put this to the council. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Sounds all right. We have to do this by the end of the month though, right?
Yeah, that I didn't do the math on that. So
Yeah.
that's 2 weeks.
Well,
What's the exact date, Julie?
My understanding is, and Michelle can affirm, my understanding is the meeting is on the 6th. Well, I have to have communications in by the 1st, I would think.
Okay.
Right, because City Hall is closed Friday the 2nd for Good Friday.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So I have to have communications in to the clerk's office by 11 o'clock on the 1st of April, which is 2 weeks. 2.5
Yep.
weeks.
All right. Well, so the idea would be to write it and pass it around and get approval. consensus.
Sebastian or Lorraine, do you have any issues with that?
No, that sounds good to me.
No,
Right.
that's fine.
Okay, and I'm fine with it as well. So Emily, are you going to take that?
Yeah, and I can start it and then hopefully Kevin can help me with a little bit and
All right.
whatever. So,
Okay. I will need it by the 31st at the latest. Done.
yeah, okay.
Okay, anything else on that topic? All right, moving on to the annual report. Sebastian, I got your comments, thank you. Everyone else submitted all their comments to me. I finalized the report. I guess you've probably all seen a sort of final version. Sebastian's comments were the latest, and it was really just grammar. Although in the section on the US stream gauge, he did add a few other uses for the stream gauge. He also, in addition to already stating the USGS stream gauge system exists to measure the level of the river, which can then serve as a planning tool, a flood warning tool, a tool for use for mapping and structural design. He also added commercial shipping uses and data collection and scientific research. And then the other things were grammatical, right, Sebastian? Okay.
Yeah. And then the
So-
questions that you had related to me.
Okay, so so everyone's seen it, and then I would say then I've finalized it, it's all cleaned up, and I want to adopt it as a CAC and then get it to the council and post it. Does anyone have any questions or need to see it again?
No,
Okay, if not, then I need a motion to accept the 2020 Annual Conservation Advisory Council report.
Motion?
Kevin,
Second.
Sebastian, second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, very good, unanimous, thank you. Thank you everyone for your contributions. I will get that finalized as PDF and get it out there. Great work. All right, new business. Last month, Sebastian had brought up a discussion about the septic code for the city, so I wanted to pass it over to Sebastian to start that conversation.
Yeah, thank you. This was related to just kind of Queensbury and Bolton had passed septic inspection laws that required inspections after the sale of a home that had a septic system. And so it just got me thinking about what we could do in Kingston. And so I ended up emailing Greg Krupp at the city, and he was super helpful in terms of, I emailed him specifically to try and understand if there are septic systems in the city, how many might there be, where might they be? And so he's looking into that now. He found about 150. The only way to go about it is to look at water hookups, but not that don't have sewer hookups. And there are about 150 of those within the city, and he estimated about half of them might have septic systems. And so he's working on putting together a list of those systems. I guess this was a project that he had been wanting to do for a little while. And then he's going to check with the plumbing inspector to see what level of scrutiny the systems are under. I guess once I hear back from him with a little bit more defined information about what the scale of the problem might be, we could think about whether or not we want to take any actions to try and address it.
Great, that's awesome. I'm glad that you were able to connect with Greg. I also reached out to DPW also to ask them what they thought, and they confirmed that our septic systems are not mapped. And they estimated fewer than 100 systems in the city, which is consistent with what Greg is saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to hear how he comes back with that information. And it brings up a point of, one second, Michelle, it brings up a point of, even if there are, let's say 50 septic, right? Where does that fall in comparison? Well, we know it would pale in comparison, frankly, to the combined sewer overflow issues that we have on a city level, right? It pales in comparison to illicit sewer connections, to illicit, storm connections that we have. So where do we put our efforts? Even illicit like downspout connections, right? So where does this fall into the grand scheme of things? Is there something we can do about it that wouldn't be like an outlandish ad for somebody? Sebastian?
Michelle, if you want to comment, because you had asked before. and then
Sure.
on to Julie.
Thank you. Just, I'm actually aware of some places that have both well and sewer. So they're not even hooked up to
They might not be hooked up.
the water, yes.
Okay.
And then Julie, I think that just clicked a bell in my brain. The crux of the Bolton law and the Queensberry law is that a home can't be sold unless the septic system's inspected. I imagine maybe we could look into if there's a legal precedent where we could say, the city of Kingston, you need to get a certificate that says you've disconnected your downspout before you can sell your home. I don't know. The septic systems are a responsibility of homeowners, I think. And so it's easy to be like, you have to maintain this because it's yours. I don't know how downspouts are. And if those lines are actually belong to the city or to the homeowner or what, but there might be a way to like dovetail these two things together to be able to address that larger issue that you did bring up, which is absolutely true, which is this is a very small piece of the pie.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that at least previously in the engineering office, Alan Aiden, who used to work for us, always talked about his concern about illicit downspout, just, connections, and, that we should have, he would always joke with me that I need to put together a program that we could figure out how to, deal with these. And if we could wrap those in together and do something to address more, something that would have maybe the same amount of effort, but a bigger bang. Those,
Yeah.
but we don't have, those aren't mapped either. So how does that,
Right, and you might, I mean, if you're gonna, one of the things about septic tanks is, what are you worried about? Are you worried about that person actually contaminating their own well because they're also on a well? Does the bank care? Is this already been done because the bank requires it? And if you're financing your home, and also, are you worried about bacteria getting into a water body that is like a wetland or local? Because both the Queensberry and Bolton Landing, you're talking about Lake George. And Lake George is heavily developed, and they're trying to keep it pristine.
Mm-hmm.
So they definitely have a reason for doing this. I would be way more concerned about buried oil tanks. I have experienced 2 oil tank situations in the 30 years I've lived here. I didn't buy a house because one had one, and I worked and I was on the library board when they discovered that their buried oil tank that had been disconnected still had oil in it after 20 years. And, and that's a huge environmental issue, and not that septic tanks don't pollute and so on, So I think that if you wrap that around maybe with buried oil tanks or other tanks, maybe that would be helpful. I do also think that this could be something that could be of interest to the Ulster County Environmental Management Council, because most of the towns are pretty much on septic. I don't know the percentage, but it would be something that they might be interested in. And of course, and if there's already something like a bank inspection, which may not be the same as looking at whether it's actually functioning environmentally versus, I don't know, being able to flush the toilets. So I think it's a really, we just need to figure out where it fits in the priority and how we can bring things together.
I think that's a really good point too. And I can see environmentally how all three of those things are linked. I guess I wouldn't know who to speak to in the city to understand, like the thing that makes the septic inspection law works is that the town withholds, like you can't sell your home until you go to the town and show them the certificate that you had your tank inspected. Does that legal mechanism, that apply to oil tanks too and to downspout connections, I guess is my question now. And who could I talk to in the city about that? Who would have a better idea? Because I don't know.
Yeah, and how many oil tanks are there, just like, and how many downspouts, right?
Yeah.
So it's for the oil tanks, maybe there aren't. Like, if I were a bank, I wouldn't pay for the house. And I know this is I'll just tell you that when I moved here 30 years ago, almost 40 years ago, there was a lot of talk about a Bearsville Flats where everyone had oil tanks, and they are right next to Woodstock's water supply. This is all in Woodstock, and that thing has still not been solved. You know, every homeowner has an oil tank, buried oil tank. And it takes a long time to get people to dig those up, but it's a huge it's a huge cost to the homeowner if they pollute the oil. And we don't even know how many oil tanks there are. Is it an issue? You know, we've taken kind of care of the gas, right? The buried gas tanks from companies, but so I think if we take it on, I think it's
Maybe building safety.
Building safety.
That's who I would guess. I mean, I don't know who else who would have oversight over things buried in people's lawns.
DEC, but it has to, they're reactive, not proactive on this.
Right.
and also I think there's a size.
Yeah, well, I had to
But
do
there
it.
might be.
I was a DEC case number once. Yes. Yeah, not good,
Is that like a pat on the back? Or is that
No, it isn't. No, it's like you hang your head in shame. The CAC secretary, a DEC case number? You gotta be kidding me. And now what it was they had an old tank, and and it wasn't being used. And I think some work had to be done on the furnace and whatever work was. And then we decided we'd take the contractor said we can take this tank out at the same time. And they took it out and they found like this much oil at the bottom, pinholes. And thousands of dollars later, they cleaned it out and had to replace the soil and backfilled it.
So yeah.
I know Tim Wiedemann knows too, because I believe the Lutheran Church had a similar issue, and they were short on cash and they couldn't pay the contractor for the final payment. So the DEC case number stayed open until they paid. That's how they get paid. They leave you open on the bad citizen list.
Yeah, and the library was just fortunate that it hadn't leaked, and they pumped it out and, pulled it out and filled it in. And
The thing is, I feel like if building safety knew about it, they wouldn't be there anymore. So like, I just don't know that there's a list of places that we would know to say like this house, this house, this house, and this house have buried oil tanks and they haven't done anything about it.
that, who would know is potentially the oil delivery man, because they want to make sure they're not dumping it into someone's basement when I don't know, but.
Changing gears for just 1 second. Emily, you mentioned that the EMC might be a good place to talk about the septic policy. I guess I think that'd be a great idea. I do want to ask if it's like, to point out the hypocrisy, kind of what Julie was getting at, like we have a massive CSO in Kingston, and I don't want to like point the fingers at other communities to be like, clean up your act. But if you think communities would be amenable to hearing that and to knowing that there are options they can pursue, I would put together something that you could present there if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I can just bring it up and see if anyone's interested in, is anyone doing anything with septic tank
Inspect.
regulation or whatever? Because of course, in the watershed, that's the whole point of the New
Mhm.
York City watershed.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of septic tanks. So it's really just outside the watershed. I don't, did you know that? So in
Yeah.
the watershed.
They have a nice program that pays people to get them inspected and pumped, but we don't.
Yeah,
have that.
right.
Yeah, I'd love that if you ask them and there's any interest, just let me know.
Okay, well, I guess our meeting is probably the day that this Ashokan release thing is due, so. I just have to say that I don't have my power cord, and is there a phone number only that I can call into in case I go dead?
Yes, but we have to find it.
I
If
got
someone
you.
could just find it and type it in.
It's on the agenda, I think.
Oh, it's on the agenda?
I hope it is. It should be, shouldn't it?
Um,
No, it's not.
I'm sending it over now. I got you.
You
Thank
got it?
you,
Hey, I don't have it
thank you.
handy. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, here it is. I found it.
You got
Okay,
it.
you got it already? You're done, okay.
All right, so what's the next step on this?
I think I can wait to hear back from Greg
Okay.
about the number of places, and then I could reach out. I think those would fall under his purview. I could ask him about illicit connections too. And then I can try to, if there's someone on building and safety, or I can just Google, figure out who's there. I'll email buildings and safety about oil tanks.
Yeah,
See if they know anything about them.
Some of the information, it's on the parcel viewer, but the assessor's information hasn't been updated. Yeah, I've found this a few times where it says fuel type oil and it isn't. You go there and you see natural gas.
okay. Yeah, Sebastian, if you go on the city's website, you'll find the contacts for building safety there.
I think they have the property cards at the building safety office that might have better information than what they've passed on to the assessor.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything else on that? It's a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you all.
Okay, moving on then to planning for our April visioning meeting and recruiting new members. So in the last month, we talked about, and we've been talking about how we're going to get how we're going to build up our council. We have 4 vacancies, but also really just have a visioning session for, what are the goals of, what are the proactive goals of the Conservation Advisory Council, and how do we rally people around that? Sebastian, did you draft up an agenda?
Yeah, I said is the draft agenda, and I really just want to be clear that this is just thoughts that I put into a document. This is not anything. Yeah, and so I just dropped that in the chat, and it's a Google document.
Great.
And
Go ahead.
I was going to say the reason I latched on so hard to what Emily was saying about Dennis Doyle at the EMC meeting was because I think this is a really good. I think trying to think about the who is a really important question. And so I included an aspect of that in here that I thought might be a little bit need to be discussed or might be a little bit controversial, but I'd welcome any and all thoughts.
Great. Does everyone have access to that Google Doc?
In a second, just
I don't know.
see. Yeah,
I don't. Where is it?
It's in the chat.
In the chat, Emily.
Oh.
It's down this side. Don't lose it. Yeah,
While everyone's bringing that up, I will say, one of the things I had said I would do is go back in my correspondence to see and review the list of folks who had applied over the last few years to be part of the Conservation Advisory Council. And it turns out that most of the people that have been applying for positions have been applying, that have been sent to me, have been applying for Climate Smart. But I did get one application for the CAC. Amanda O'Neill, who is a librarian.
Hmm.
So I will, she lives on Franklin Street. So I will reach out to her to invite her. But what, do you want to walk us through this, Sebastian?
Yeah, and again, this is very kind of just brief. I just threw it together, but I tried to divide it up into 4 kind of main areas. Kind of a vision process of like, what do we really want? You know, what kind of a city do we want to live in? How do we want the air to be, the land to be, the water to be? Goals. So thinking about ways to get to those visions, how to accomplish them. Strategies, which I think is trying to think about how do we achieve those goals? Who do we have power and influence over? What processes do we have control over? And then how can we leverage? I know there's a lot, you know, looking over the historical document, the CIC document, it was really clear how many linkages there are between people on this board and other organizations. And so trying to think about how we can use those connections in a way to get our agenda passed. And then trying to think about, maybe this is to the last bit about getting people interested, is how can we get the public more broadly engaged with the CAC? And how can we get them to bring issues to us so that we can really kind of try and be a voice for our own concerns, but also a voice for theirs.
I think this is great. I think at some point we need to add a section about the nexus to the common council and to the city, because our role is really to advise city government. And so, like, how is the current forum for how we have that connection the most effective way to do so? So right now, our direct formal connection is through public safety. We're depending on communications from the council to be coming through us through that, and that's how we're communicating back to the council. So is that the most effective way for us to be doing that? You know, is the way that we communicate with city departments the most effective way for us to be doing that? And what is the most effective way for city departments to be communicating with us? That's something I would like to add to this, is the role of the CAC within the government. Also, I think we would be remiss if we didn't address the relationship of Conservation Advisory Council to Climate Smart Kingston, because there is so much overlap and possible, you know, how do we make it clear to the community that there are 2 different boards and commissions and what the roles of each of them are? And does it still make sense to have both?
Those are great additions.
You know, and this might end up breaking down into 2 meetings. It might be you know, what is the CAC's relationship to government operations meeting and a CAC's relationship to community meeting? I don't know though. But what are other folks' thoughts on this?
Well, I think we had a big involvement in the comp plan, and some of the questions here are somewhat answered by the comp plan, I believe. And so there is that relationship too, plus, you know, the other groups that we represent.
To the comp plan?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we had we really had a lot of involvement in writing it, and now the open space plan is an addendum to that.
Right, and that brings up a good point. What is our relationship with the comp plan and the open space plan? Like, is the CAC then forever responsible for enacting the open space plan or not? Right, so like, what is the relationship to that? What is the relationship to the climate action plan?
Also, I was just looking at the CAC pages on the website, the city website, and they don't look like they've been updated in quite some time. I was actually looking for the application to send it to someone.
It's probably not there. All of the applications are on the main page of the city's website. There's a thing
Okay.
called like boards and commissions. That's centralized in one space. So absolutely, yes, the website, with the exception of the air quality page, the website is ridiculously outdated. So yes, we can definitely address that. And maybe we need to be then talking about in the public input and engagement part, like Climate Smart has a Facebook page, and Climate Smart, maybe it's not very active. I don't know. It's not on Facebook, but like at least there is a Climate Smart Facebook presence. CAC doesn't have that. What else?
I guess I just need to understand a little bit more about the whole concept, because I wasn't at last month's meeting.
Well, it started with, when Betta decided not to re-up her position here. It started with, okay, now we only have 5 official council members and we can have 9. The minimum we can have is 5. So if any one of us currently chooses to leave, we don't have a functioning board. And
Right.
so it started with we need to get more people here. And then it came, and I think Sebastian probably brought it up, that it was like, well, when we go to talk to people to say, do you want to be part of the Conservation Advisory Council? What kind of message, like what are we saying that we do, or who are we, or, what entices people to be here? And that's where we kind of moved to let's have a visioning, because we have been, compared to Climate Smart, we have been more, some of what we do is reactionary, some of what we do is proactive, right? So there's some things that we have on every agenda. And then there's other things that'll come up, like Hutton Brickyards or Kingston Meadows or any project, name any development. And then that comes up and then we do that. We do development reviews, or something comes up with whatever. Think of anything that's been on our agenda, it comes up and then we put it on the agenda. But we're not necessarily sitting here in January and saying, by the end of 2021, we want to have these goals or this vision or whatever. And do we need to do that? Like, is that something that we want to do? Or is it the way that we're operating now, the way that is the functional way for us to do it? CACs across the state look very, very different from each other. But at the crux, they all have the same establishing, local law or, state law that establishes all of us, but they look very different. And I don't know that we've ever, since November of 2008, when we started this party, ever had a powwow to just be like, this is what the CAC is, and this is what we want it to be. I don't know if that categorized.
Well, we've accomplished a lot in that time with the NRI, and the biodiversity and the open space and the climate action plan and all of those things. And we've done a lot. But you're right. Like, I mean, and we've always been like policy, because there's other things that have been accomplished in the city that could have been done by us, like community gardens, but we could do something like on biodiversity in our own yards, or wildlife habitat, or pollinator, and those kind of things. And right now we're much more policy oriented, not to get people to show people how to plant pollinator gardens, for instance.
Right. And that's something else that maybe that we should figure out how to weave in here, is that we have seen it such that, like, Climate Smart didn't even used to exist. It was just CAC, and then it branched off with the Climate Action Plan. And so now we have this sort of division, but we also see that, in many other CACs, the CACs do environmental education, a lot of them do, but we don't, because there is a division within our government that does environmental education. So like the CAC doesn't need to do that. So, in a lot of communities, they're wearing a lot of hats that we don't need to wear because there's other people wearing them already, which
Right.
I think is fantastic. But then it makes it very like, what is our niche that we are trying to fill? And is there a gap somewhere that somebody's missing that maybe we should be picking up? Or is there a nexus with some other group that we could be building on what they're doing? That we're
Right,
not making
like-
that connection right now.
Right, like trees. We could work on, small wetland preservation, small, small streams and wetlands. We could look at the greenhouse gas potential of our tidal wetland. They did that in one of the, in Garrison. We could look at how, whether, how our wetland is going to succeed or not with, we could, put instrumentation on the wetland like the, Hudson River Research Reserve is doing, and what Scenic Hudson was working on, those kind of things. There are different ideas and those are just popping up, but yeah, I agree. I mean, and whether or not we're supposed to carry out the open space, I guess we are. Like, well, how are we going to get those trees planted or connecting to more parks or something? So, I like it. I wanted to say that my idea of how to get new members was to brainstorm about all the people we know that work in the environmental, that live in Kingston and work in the environmental, some way in the environment, and for one reason or another, they can't be in this group. We have people that work for Department of State, DEP, DEC, and maybe and Riverkeeper and Scenic Hudson and BARD, and even if they can't be on it, can they help us find other people that could be on it because of the friends and the people they hang out with? And so that was my idea. It was just like direct one-on-one contact, email or phone or text as one way. And then, but yeah, there should be an elevator speech.
Yeah. And to go back to the kind of origin of this, of like, Climate Smart doesn't have the same problem that we do, right? There are a lot of people who want to join it. And that's because in the name, you have everyone who's already associated, oh yeah, climate change is an issue. I'm going to work on this committee that's going to stop climate change because they're climate smart. And so within it, there's kind of this built-in narrative that we don't have access to. Sorry, I have a cat here. I'm just going to let that. So they have a built-in narrative that we don't have access to. And I think we can create one because all of the things that Emily just listed off are incredible. Like that's great work that not a lot of communities have, I imagine. And so we can create a vision based on that work that we can then share with people and explain to them, like, listen, like this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. And I think we have the benefit of being really policy oriented. That's a huge plus. I feel like the fact that we're able, I hope this is okay, but like to point to Julie, like that you're able to liaise between this group and the city, I think makes this more effective in a lot of ways because you're able to connect us with the people who might be doing something. So I think everything that just was said was great. And I think it definitely is kind of why we should be thinking about these things. And we don't have to go super deep. If it's just, we look at the open space plan and pull some things from there on the comprehensive plan and say, like, this is our vision, this is what we want. I think that's wonderful, but it'd be nice to hear everyone's thoughts. I really am so curious, what do we all think, what we want to get out of this?
So there's two things at play. One is how do we get people to a meeting? Particularly the April meeting, so that this conversation can be fruitful. And then the second is, how do we get through all that in less than like 15 hours? So let's first talk about getting people here. I love Emily's idea. I also want to be mindful though that we don't necessarily want to just hone ourselves into only people that are already environmentally background. Because, I mean, yes, some of us are, but some of us here are not. And I think what's really important is somebody who has a passion about Kingston and is willing to be part of this conversation. Yes, it is extremely beneficial if people have connections and background, but I don't think it should be the only weighing factor. But I think using, like you said, going through those organizations and saying, hey, dear, so-and-so and so-and-so, all these groups that you mentioned, we have vacancies on the Conservation Advisory Council. April 13th is going to be our big visioning and regrouping meeting. We would love you to come and just check out what we're doing. Here's some minutes and agendas you can check out.
Is there something that can just be written up as like an invitation then that can be then shared on social media and like some kind of visual and?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about a visual.
Or logo or just,
I think there's a logo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can put that together.
Okay.
I'll put that together and then send it to folks and we can circulate it and get folks here for the April 13th meeting.
And then I can bring it back to public safety and the council to ask all the alder people to share it.
Julie, do you feel like you're okay with leading this meeting and figuring out how we can get feedback?
Do you think we should bring in a moderator?
Oh, no, I don't. I mean, it's so much easier when we're in person and we can like write on flip charts or something. So I don't know. I just was wondering if you were, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And I agree 100% wholeheartedly, but we haven't been given the go ahead to have in-person meetings yet.
no, I know. Yeah, so I just was, I mean, what kind, have you thought about what you're trying to, what kind of feedback you're getting? And are we just going to take minutes on it? Or are people going to put it in the chat? You know, there's other methods that I can share. I only know one, but I probably could look up more.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on multiple different platforms where you could write on a whiteboard, you know, sticky note platforms. I've used all of them.
Yeah.
I think
Good.
they're terrible compared to actually being in person, but
Yes.
I get the value of it. And frankly, whoever designed those systems to basically replicate exactly the way it is in real life is pretty awesome. But
Okay, so yeah, that's all. I just think.
Yeah, if we want to keep doing this in April, then yes. I mean, I don't know that the city has a subscription to a more fancy version than Zoom. I mean, Zoom has annotation options, but that would be like me screwed.
Right, because there's breakout groups. Some Zooms have breakout groups and some Zooms have,
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely used whiteboards. But you can bring something else in and put it on the screen. The only one I'm familiar with is Padlet, padlet.com, and allows you to basically write on a sticky note
Okay.
and move it around and
Yeah,
Right.
Stormboard.
yeah, Stormboard.
If you want, Julie, I'm happy to like sous chef you. And like we can figure out how to do it in Google Docs where maybe each subject is its own Google Doc and I'm taking notes as people are dictating kind of verbatim.
Yeah,
That would free you up to be able to moderate and kind of shape the conversation.
that's good.
Well, it's also recorded anyway, so.
It's recorded anyway.
back.
essentially.
Yeah, I think that's
But
good.
Yeah, but if there's some kind of consensus you want to get out, you know what I mean? Like, okay, we have 5 topics, so do you want to vote? You know, you can, there is, I've been on some things where there are voting, we're
Yeah, you can
on
react.
Zoom.
Or you can do thumbs up.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I've seen it where I'm on something else where we actually vote on things, and it is Zoom, but
Yeah,
I don't do it.
I'll have to see. I don't see an obvious
Yeah.
button on the bottom that says vote here. So I'll have to look into that.
And
But yeah, I've done the same.
maybe this is kind of selfish sounding, but like I'm also I think the visioning thing is going to be meaningful for everyone here. Anyone who wants to participate, that would be wonderful. But I also see that as being hard for a newcomer to have to step into a new space and then articulate kind of this vision for this process that they're still learning. And so I'm also really open to this being, the public can always join, but if this is just us still, I still really think it'd be valuable for us to kind of think through these things together. Just to put that out there.
Okay, I totally hear you.
Hmm.
Because you're saying people would be coming in to see how the sausage is made.
Kind of, and like I mean, I'm still, I wasn't super comfortable for the first 6 months, I think. And still, it took me a very long time to feel like, okay, like I understand what's going on. I can make comments about things. I think it takes some time for people to feel comfortable. And like, I would love to hear people's first impressions when they come in and what they want to see, but also recognize that even if it's just us and we're thinking it through, I still think this will be a really valuable exercise.
Yeah. Well, what do the rest of you think of that?
Fine with me. Yeah. Well, we could have it as a retreat,
Right? That's what it would basically be, a retreat.
right? So, I mean, I guess, is it going to be a meeting or is it going to be an unrecorded retreat?
Well, that's another option. Is that we set another meeting time. April meeting stays normal, the rest of the year stays normal. We set another time that's not public. Although I don't know how that works. Maybe it has to be public.
I know, can you look into that?
Well, I know the council can't. I don't know if we can't. The council can't meet with more than
Meet for a retreat, like there's different provisions under open meeting law for retreats, but you don't really we can't set any legislative action or make decisions.
Right.
Sebastian, you're thinking something?
I'm just digging this idea right now because I think that we could maybe we could do a public meeting that's geared towards visioning, where we try to have the public come in, we try to have new people come in, and we try to create maybe like a shared vision of what we want the CIC to look like, what issues we want to be taking on. But in reality, what Kingston do we want to see, right? Like that's the core of it. And then maybe after that, we could do a retreat where we think through the kind of more nuts and bolts of it, which is roles and relationships to the city. Something like that, where we're dividing up the work a little bit and still trying to get people's input into the process, but also respecting that, like, you're right, this is going to take if we went through this would take hours to go through. So how do we start chunking it out?
But that gets back to is a new person going to be able to come here and say, this is what I think you should be doing? Without knowing what we're already doing?
I think so. Maybe they're wrong. That's okay. I don't know what the CAC does. I don't even know what an open space plan was before I got here, So like, maybe they'd come in and they're like, why aren't you doing something about the trash in my backyard?
Right.
That's their responsibility. But like, the trash next door, whatever it may be. So I don't know. I think we run that risk, but that's the public, man.
What do other people think? I'm okay either way.
Just wondering whether there's whether this makes sense, first of all, but also whether there's a mechanism for contacting people who had participated in the climate action plan rollout, that meeting that was done, the big rollout meeting. There seemed to be a lot of participants, a lot of very engaged people. I don't know how those people were contacted to begin with. Whether there's some sort of list, maybe those people would be people, it would make sense that there might be some overlap interest there. What do you think of that?
I mean, they could be on the invite. If we were to do a public thing, that I would invite that group.
Uh-huh.
But just to let you know how that group came to be.
Yeah.
Just tons of marketing. That wasn't those weren't direct asks. I mean, we sent out a postcard to every person in the city of Kingston who was on the radio and everywhere.
So just those people who had an interest, in other words, then participated. So that's good.
Yeah, that was months and months of preparation.
Right. But is there an actual list of those folks, and is it acceptable or proper to use that list for this purpose, to invite people, or I don't know?
Well, there's two parts to that question. Yes, there is a list. I have committed that the only way I would use that list was to communicate to those folks about climate action plan work.
Okay. I see.
Consider climate action plan work?
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, but I do have a climate smart, I have an outreach or distribution list of people that go onto the Climate Smart website and they click a link to be added to a distribution list, and that has like several hundred people on it. So I certainly would send it to that group as well.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of
Okay. Uh-huh.
But yeah, I see Sebastian's point about this also, in that some of this is more visionary and some of this is more logistic. And of course, I always get to the logistic because that's how my mind works. But there's a place for both. And the question is the place for both with the same audience?
Mm-hmm.
Because we could do the visioning, and maybe this is okay, but we could do the visioning with the community and they could come up with a million things, none of which are under the actual purview of the Conservation Advisory Council.
Yeah.
And then is it the whole time me saying, actually, that's done by DPW, actually, that is happening here, actually, look here, actually, so and so, actually, or do we just absorb everything, which is very hard for me to do because I want to be like, oh, we're doing that already, but here.
I think, yeah, it sounds to me that maybe what you want to do is come up with a list and ask them to help us prioritize or something, because I don't, like, should we work on, or ask them how we can achieve the tree situation, or can we, or how can we help with housing? I don't know. I think that, I think it would really help if Sebastian and Julie had a meeting off to the side and figured out the agenda.
Okay.
And whether it's going to be us and them, not to
No, that sounds like a good
not
idea.
to push it aside, but it's 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I just had one last thought, which was that maybe it would be a good thing to add to the Google Doc the mission statement at the top, so people are not off in all directions. That would certainly at least sort of guide the responses that you get.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good input. Sebastian will follow up with you after the fact. We set something up.
Cool.
And then I'll circle everyone in once we decide what we're going to do, just so you know how to be prepared for whatever happens next in this life. Okay. And if something pops in your head after the fact and you're like, oh, I think of this, send a note to me and Sebastian and I.
Definitely. Thank you everyone so much for your thoughts.
Yeah. Thanks, Sebastian, for putting that together. That's like
No problem.
awesome.
Thank you.
I don't have any communications. Are there any announcements or events? Not too many events these days. This is a quick agenda item in the last year. Any updates from Complete Streets, Lorraine?
Yes, we had a meeting on the 10th of February, and the discussion was about, among other things, honing in on sidewalks, which areas to prioritize with this sidewalk plan. And there was discussion of whether to prioritize, the ideas seem to gravitate toward prioritizing high pedestrian use routes, as well as routes that connect with transit hubs, bus station, etc. So the Ulster County involved person, who's Brian Slack, was reporting that the GIS inventory of all the sidewalks is 100% completed, and that they know where all the sidewalks are and where there are none, and that they are just about 100% complete with the condition that the sidewalks are in. There will be a dashboard shortly. He said it's all digitized. And then the next piece is educating the council about this, and then how to fund it. And that still hasn't been addressed. So, oh, I just want to also mention that today the survey came out through Engage Kingston on the Flatbush Foxhall plan. So if people wanted to maybe look at that through the city site, Engage Kingston.
And have you been keeping up with the bike ped master plan process?
Say that again, Julie. I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
Has Complete Streets been involved with the bike ped master plan?
Yeah, let's see. Yes, I think I'm just looking for it here. Sorry. No, I mean, I always was just looking at my involvement as the sidewalk task force, but I know they did. Yeah, let's see. Oh, sorry, I could send it.
I didn't know if you were involved in that at all, but now just since
No.
Emily Flynn, the health and wellness director, and other city staff are working on a bicycle pedestrian master plan. And they have interns and staff right now gathering information, data to inform that plan. So they're gathering, crosswalk information and, sidewalk information and curb cut information and all these other things. So all these different data points to help inform a full master plan for bikes and pedestrians for the city. So I just didn't know what the role of Complete Streets was in that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is something there. I just don't have it at my fingertips, but thank you for that.
Okay. All right, anything else, Lorraine?
No.
Kevin, planning board? Kevin, you're muted.
No, I lost.
Still muted.
We're okay now. Okay, you lost the mute button, sorry. I was typing the minutes. Yeah, well, we already covered Hutton, so I think that's sort of done at the planning board. They did have Lucas Avenue back again. That was scheduled. And I noticed that there was some public comment on it coming out of Bluestone Court, where some people felt that they were too close to the lot line. And I don't know how the planning board handled that, or if they did handle it, but I think that covers us, I think, for the moment on the planning board between Bluestone Court and Hutton.
Okay. Thanks. Michelle, anything from public safety?
Nothing of major consequence.
Okay, thanks. Kevin, zoning, anything we didn't talk about already?
Yeah, Michelle, feel free to, chime in if you have, want to do that. Yeah, came up at the Common Council Finance Committee the other day. And was discussed in depth, and Dover Cole came, both Joseph Cole and Victor Dover Or do I have it backwards? Well, anyway, Misters Dover and Cole came and presented, and they brought a staff member with them as well. And they were answering questions that the council members had. And there was a question that came up. There were two questions. One, of course, is the cost, which the council is sorting that out. And John Tui was there reporting on the fund balance and the possibility of using the fund balance for it. The open question had to do, Dan Gartenstein brought this up, and it had to do with SECRA and what would, how that was going to be handled, if that was included in the report, where the consultant would do similar to what the consultants on the comprehensive plan did. As they went along, they notated the EIS discussion in the comprehensive plan. If you go into the comp plan, you'll see that. And that was the open question. Is that going to be done on the zoning so that it's not a whole big to-do with a separate consultant and all kinds of additional costs on SECRA? Because it will be a most likely a generic impact statement, and it will have to be a public comment. And if they can prepare the EIS during the zoning process, it'll expedite the process. So I think where they left it was to leave the matter open, not table it, leave it open until March 31st and go back to Dover and Cole and get an answer on SECRA. Michelle, did I get that right?
Yes, that is correct. I'm just,
Okay. It was a mouthful.
yeah. Yeah, so we're having a special finance meeting just on March 31st.
My question, I think, for this council would be whether you want to send the finance committee or the common council a letter of support for the zoning change or not. I'll just throw that open. I know it's getting late, but I'll throw that open for discussion. Hearing no discussion, I guess we'll move on.
Kevin, I think I lost something here. So Mr. Dover and Mr. Cole, but what is this project?
Oh, this is the zoning from the comprehensive plan. So you
Okay.
do the form-based code.
So the cost of that is what you're talking about.
The cost was about $490 some odd thousand. They had a second bid that was less favorable, but it ran 460. Then there was a third bid in there that was a low ball, and they weren't going to actually do form-based code. They were just going to tweak the existing, which sounded expensive for what that was. So that was sort of rejected out of hand, and the zoning task force went with Dover Cole. Now, Dover Cole has John Lyons from Pace Law as their legal consultant, which is a huge plus. And it has David Gilmore involved, who's done, well, he did the complete streets for Kingston, and he's been involved in other projects in Kingston. And he has, they have several people on this team that are very knowledgeable with SECRA. So it would seem that they probably can do it, but they'll have to tell the council that, the common council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think we'll move on from there. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay.
Climate Smart. Kevin, do you want to give an update on that, or do you want me to?
If you want to start, because I don't have the minutes open.
Sure.
I do have the minutes for you, but I don't have them open. So go right ahead.
Old business is pretty typical. We kind of went over the same things we always do every meeting, that update on the climate action plan. All the surveys have come in now. The consultants are just pulling together the information on prioritizing. We talked a little bit about how Repair Cafe is going to move on now without John Wackman, and what sort of the next iteration of that's going to look like. The pizza box campaign, recycling campaign is moving forward, but We haven't really seen that actually in action yet. We're still figuring out the logistics. The big thing that we talked about was the Clean Energy Communities Leadership Round. So we had applied for funding the first, or applied to be a clean energy community the first round, which we were the first city clean energy community. And this is now a leadership round, and we have already now submitted many actions to get us towards certification again, or further certification. One of those actions is still remaining that would get us full access to $125,000 grant, would be the adoption of the New York Stretch Energy Code. And actually that's on Laws and Rules agenda for tomorrow night. So I'm going to be meeting with Laws and Rules tomorrow night with the NYSERDA representative to discuss that option with the council. So Ellie in my office has been working hard on that leadership round. And we've been able to really do a lot. I mean, with our LED conversions, our building light conversions, HVAC upgrades at the Roundout Center, EV charging stations, electric vehicles, energy benchmarking, unified solar permit, all these energy initiatives that we've done really have put us to the top in the leaderboard for communities around the state. So we're hoping to continue to strive for the best. And so that's kind of something we covered at that meeting.
I'm wondering if the zoning, if it were to come to pass, how many points that would get? Because we were kicking the stretch code around quite a bit at that meeting, but I don't know.
I'm not following you.
Well, I think what Ariel was describing was how many climate action points the different actions
Yep.
Carry, and I'm just wondering how the zoning was included at some point. I'm just wondering how many points that has, if we know.
I don't think zoning
It doesn't.
doesn't.
Doesn't. Okay. That.
It might in climate smart communities, but in the clean energy community.
Yeah, it carries. Yeah, it doesn't carry weight.
No.
Okay, that answers my question on that.
Yeah, it's really specific, and zoning is not part of that.
And I think the last thing, because I had missed the very end of that meeting, but I did catch the video, and Mike Darcy was there, and he represented Council Assembly Member Cahill, and he ran us through, or ran the commission through several different pending legislations. One was to establish a tax on carbon-based fuels. One was to exclude the value of state forest lands from use in the determination of state aid to school districts. I'm not sure how that, I'll think about that one for a second. Establish a green development neighborhood tax exemption. And the last one had to do with overtaking a bicycle from behind at a distance of less than 3 feet. And with that, I think that meeting was adjourned. And
so those were all bills that were passed by the.
I think they were pending.
Okay.
I gathered. I don't think they're passed yet. I think they're still, and I think he co-sponsored each of them.
Okay. Okay. So that was climate smart. Emily, do you have an update on EMC? I don't know if we have Emily still. I can say I was not able to make the trip.
Sorry.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead. Oh.
I'm still here. I have 10% power on my laptop.
Yeah.
So I did send the minutes out a little bit ago, but we had a presentation from Riverkeeper, Rebecca Martin, and the lawyer, and some other people for the on the New York City Ashokan release, including Bill Wegner. And and the lawyer. And they, they've asked people to, as you know, to send out a resolution. And then again, the Department of the Environment is also looking at the turbidity, and they've anyway, and they have a Bard College student working with them to identify towns that could assist in developing a sustainability plan. Besides the Ashokan release, I just want to say that this everyone in the county was surprised that Premium Energy Holdings made a file with the with FERC to FERC is the Federal Energy and I can't remember what it stands for, but actually they put in a proposal to do a pump storage using the Ashokan as the water, and putting in some kind of reservoir to pump the water up and down. And everyone was surprised, from Central Hudson to all the towns around and DEP themselves. So it was covered in both the Freeman and the Hudson Valley one, and you can read about it. So people were just surprised that had happened, that someone from out of the area came up with this idea without telling any of the stakeholders. And then the Champlain Power Express, Hudson Power Express has come up, and this has been in the works for a really long time. And but this was in particular, so the Champlain Hudson Power Express is trying to bring hydropower from Canada down to Yonkers, and that much of it would be in water in Lake Champlain and the Hudson, but they would come out of the water between above the contamination at Fort Edwards and come back in around Bethlehem and then go back in the water. And they would be using and the cable is direct current. It is not alternating current, it's direct current. And that the Hudson 7 in particular is very concerned about this because they just really heard about it, even though the Champlain Express, Hudson Power Express, which some people call Chippy, this has been in the works for, I would say, almost a decade, since the permitting was done in 2015. And this would be the one thing that the city of Kingston would be potentially interested about, because it is going to go down the Hudson, and there have been environmental concerns worked out in terms of when the cable can be laid and stuff, but it actually uses jets to kind of to dredge the sediment and simultaneously lay the cable. And the Hudson 7, which are the communities with drinking water, are concerned because of the turbidity. And by the way, the Hudson 7 also pretty much all experienced turbidity from the Ashokan releases from the high turbidity in December and January. And they are also following that. So any questions on Champlain Hudson Express, Power Express?
All right, anything else, Emily, on EMC?
No.
Okay, thank you. Tree Commission meeting I couldn't make this month, unfortunately. So I don't actually have an update, but we are entering into that restriction time period at the end of this month. So anyone who is planning on taking down trees needs to be doing so before March of this year, and then or waiting until later in the year. So I don't have any other reports or updates. Does anyone have any others? If not, our next meeting would be April 13th. Will we have quorum? People have their calendars. Yes, assuming, well, this is what Sebastian and my decision is about the meetings, but let's just say we are going to meet on the 13th. Are we good then?
Yep.
Good for me.
Okay, then if there's no other business, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Mike, can I get a second?
Second.
Lorraine, all in favor?
Aye.
8:20. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. Good
You're
night.
welcome.
Okay.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Right, thank you.